Welcome to Four Questions, the webcast where we host very inspirational leaders right here at Blackmore 4. Now, today we're speaking to the Chief Executive Officer at Engage MIS and Chief International Officer at Education Horizons Group, Barry Ans. Hi, Barry. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. So before we dive into our four questions, Barry, I would absolutely love to hear a little bit about your background. I have been privy to it, but I'd like to hear out of your own mouth, what is your career? What does it entail? What have you done?
So I didn't go to university. I decided to come straight out of school and go straight into the workplace. So a slightly brave and questionable decision perhaps at the time. Yeah. I ended up in IT engineering as a networking and server engineer. And initially for a sort of route where I was an administrator in a company and sort of worked my way up and got my qualifications in those areas. And I've worked as an engineer, worked on help desks, I've worked in sales environments, marketing environments, all sort of different parts of the business, and ended up in management. And over my career, I've run a telecommunications and IT business, an accounting software firm, and also an education software product as well, which is my current role. We work with independent and international schools all around the world. I effectively run the UK arm of that and the international part of the Education Horizons Group. So yeah, it's been an interesting career path that I didn't design or think I'd end up on, but I think that's often the way.
Wow, that's so interesting. You know, Barry, I've engaged with people in the past, professionals in my past life, you know, coaching senior level management. And a lot of the time people are so embarrassed when they say, you know, I didn't study, I don't have an MBA. And, you know, and it's like, hey, listen, everybody chooses a different path or chooses one by default, but it doesn't make you less capable or less able or less ambitious. I mean, there's so many different things like attitude and motivation and tenacity that makes someone successful. What is successful? But anyway, before we get into a completely different realm, let's dive into four questions. Now, on LinkedIn, a couple of weeks ago, we actually shared a really interesting article by skillsyouneed.com. And they noted that the most important skills that leaders need to be effective include strategic thinking, planning and delivery, people management, change management, communication, as well as persuasion and influence. But it's difficult to assume that there's this magical formula of skills that someone needs to possess in order to be a successful leader across all industries, contexts, and cultures. Or is there? So question one, Barry, what do you think? Is there a standard prototype of leadership set of skills that presents with something that we should all aspire to or not?
I think that certainly the skills that you mentioned, you know, are all, you know, clearly really important skills that any leader, you know, should have. I think I've often thought, you know, in terms of, I've always been involved in technology businesses really, and I've often thought, you know, could I lend myself into a different industry, you know, easily and well, you know, whether that's a retail industry or some sort of manufacturing industry or whatever the case. And I do think a lot of the skills that I've built up and that you mentioned are, you know, transferable skills across all those industries. So I suppose I do think there's a standard prototype, but I also feel that in order to be successful, sometimes you need some particular skills in different industries and, you know, different ways of working that really speak to the people. And if people are really important, you know, in that industry, perhaps, you know, you may be, I suppose, lended to one industry or vertical more than perhaps another. So I think I definitely think that. And I definitely think that there's, you know, certain people that just do some of those skills you mentioned and perhaps of other skills really, really well, and that lends themselves really to being able to succeed in a particular role or particular industry. So I suppose to answer your question, I do think there is a standard prototype, but I do think the skills you need and the experience you have sometimes make you a better fit for certain roles than others.
Now let's look inside. Question 2. What leadership skills do you feel have served you in the various roles you've held throughout your career?
So I think it's got to be people management would be my number one. And I've always worked in businesses where people are really, central. Whilst they've been technology businesses, you just couldn't achieve anything or, really succeed without the aid of the people around you. So having a strong team and having, I suppose, as a leader, the ability to take those people with you, to inspire them, and take your own passion and want to succeed, your tenacity, and influence those people in order to act in the same way. So there's absolutely no chance I ever could have succeeded in anything I did without brilliant people around me. So that skill is the one that I've personally, it feels more instinctive to me, I think, as a start. So it's one that I think that's just served me well. I've never actually had any formal sort of people management training, but I just feel that, my ability to be able to work with people and get them to come on the journey with me is the thing that served me the most in my career personally anyway.
Yeah, I suppose it's that whole notion of if a tree is cut down in a forest, does it make a noise? It's the same notion as leadership. Without people, there is no concept of leadership. There's no one to lead.
That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's down to people.
Certainly, I think that's what served me the best in my career and continues to do so.
Lovely. Okay, so let's get really detailed now. How have you leveraged against different skill sets during the changing nature of your own leadership role?
So I think coming back to people management again, I think where I've had weaknesses in my own leadership style, I've really leveraged, I suppose, that ability to persuade people and influence people to help me with the weaknesses that I have. I think one of the things I've had to develop the most is that sort of visionary or strategic thinking, really, because running a business as is very different to running a business that you want it to be. The day-to-day and standing still is now no longer acceptable in most businesses. You constantly have to be striving for growth, to be innovating. It's not just about keeping the wheels on, as it were. It's much more about how can we, jet propel this business? How can we grow? How can we take on more customers? How can we do things more quickly? How can we do them faster? How can we do them harder? All of those things are now what people want, I think, from modern leaders. So, certainly I've had to, you can't really get people to do your strategic thinking for you. So the way I've been able to open up those skills for myself is really by developing more time and giving myself that space, if you like, to be able to do that thinking and start, and take away through it. And time's an underrated part. Everybody wants more time, but nobody can really create it easily. Yeah. But I think my ability to delegate has definitely been something I've had to work on, because at the start of being a leader, you just feel right. To be a leader is I'll do everything, show people I can do it, and they'll follow me. And then you realise that that's not, you're just going to burn yourself out. That's not going to be possible. People won't necessarily always come with you unless you encourage them to do that. So I've created a rule for myself, which is, if I can delegate to somebody else, if somebody else has got this skill in the business, then I'm going to get them to do it instead, and try and create more time for myself, to give myself that space, if you like, for the strategic thinking. I mean, I'm good at operational things, so I've really lent it, alongside that, and I kind of understand what the scale of a project when I take it on. I've certainly had to work on communication, but that's something I've leveraged more. And I don't mean communication on a one-to-one basis, but sort of on a group communication basis, and that rule of you have to communicate 10 times more than you think you do. I certainly experienced that during the course of my career. You really just have to keep on saying the same thing to really hammer it home for people to really get the message. So I think, those skill sets, I think knowing what you're good at and what you're not so good at is really important as a leader. So you either create the ability to be able to do it through the creation of time or by delegation or whatever the case may be. And then, leaning on other people as part of your wider team, when you are really weak at something or you just don't have that expertise. But I think, again, in past times, I would have tried to teach myself something or research something, and I found that there's a shortcut in terms of bringing in people that are really good at what they do, and it often saves time and money.
And tell me, I mean, we spoke about things like the strategic thinking, we've spoken about group communication, delegation. So it's great that you've become sort of inwardly introspective and you've identified areas that you want to develop. How have you developed that? I mean, have you formally done it through courses? Is it through peers, mentoring, coaching, or is it just that self-awareness?
I think certainly just taking time at the end of a task or a project or some sort of operational thing that's gone on and saying, how did that go? Was it good? Could I have done it better? What would I do differently next time? So learning from experience and being introspective is really important. But I also think it's really important to have good mentors around you. So whether they're peers or people that have kind of got the experience and got the t-shirt. I used to be somebody that wouldn't always trust when somebody said to me, oh, do it this way, I've got the experience, I've done this, and I'd think, well, maybe you just didn't do it right, I'll try it myself. Was it? And then I work out actually everything they told me was true. So I think if you've got a good relationship with somebody and who you trust, you should listen and take on board what they've got to say. So I think surround yourself with those kind of people that will give you honest feedback, whether they're people that you report into, whether they're your shareholders or the chair or a non-exec or something like that of a board. I think it's really important to listen to those people and have those people give you, they generally do give you their honest feedback because you tend to have quite direct conversations, but it's really important to listen to those and have those kind of relationships.
Sensitive, yeah,
absolutely. And then I think the people that report into you and your team around you, having the ability for them to say to you, look, you got this wrong. You don't want yes people sat around you all the time. You want people to tell you what you've got wrong. And I've learned as a leader, you very rarely get told when you're doing something right, but you definitely get told when you're doing something wrong if you've got the right relationships around you. So I think taking that on board, not taking that to heart, not throw off your worries when you throw off your clothes type mentality, I think is always something I've tried to live by. I don't always succeed. I have led in bed worrying about things, but I've got better at that as I've got older as well and more experienced. And ultimately, a lot of these things that we do, yes, they're important at the time, but probably in a year's time, I won't worry about them or I've forgotten about them. So, yeah, it's trying to, I think, build those different points of communication into you and being introspective in summary.
Oh man, so interesting. So last question for the day, question 4. Research aside, in terms of that list that we went through, Barry, what do you personally think are the most important traits in a leader?
So if I'm being led personally, I feel as though I have to have bought into that person. And I don't just mean their strategy or how they conduct themselves on a day-to-day basis or how they talk to people. I think I'd go as deep to say it's about their ethics, how they want to do business, how they treat the people around them, how they treat their customers, I have to be working with people that I feel, you know, are doing the right thing, you know, from a sort of corporate responsibility perspective, as much as the fact that we're a business and we're in it to make returns for the shareholders. So I think that's always been an important thing for me. I don't want to follow somebody that you know, doesn't have those traits really. So I try to, you know, bear that in mind when I'm trying to take people with me as well, that they want to follow somebody that is, you know, a decent person, you know, being at its most simple really. So I think that's a really important trait. The other one I would pinpoint that I haven't always you know, worked with people that are able to do this, because they don't do it intentionally, but they get busy and they can't, there's too much going on around them. I personally think that if you say you're going to do something, you know, you have to do it. Or at the very least, if you're not going to do it, you've got to communicate you're not going to do it and the why you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important trait, because it's really easy as a leader to get busy and to deprioritize things, and, you know, just forget about them ultimately, and move on. But I think if you've said you're going to do something, whether it's to a customer, to a member of your staff, or, you know, anybody around you, you've got to do it. So doing what you say you're going to do, I think that builds trust. It means that you're demonstrating honesty, and I think, you know, that gives you that sort of picture of an ethical leader as well, going back to my previous point too. So I think for me, that those are the things that, you know, are the most important traits.
You know what is so fascinating is many a times we think that being an effective or a great leader requires things like, you know, this insane talent, strategic thinking, vision, innovation, all these like almost superhero skills. And when you get down to the crux of it, because a lot of what you're saying, I actually agree with, a lot of the things that you're saying is things that we're so capable of doing. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy to create a persona of integrity. You don't say, hey, I've got high integrity. You actually demonstrate it. So I'm not saying it's easy. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is it's just so attainable. And I think a lot of the time people miss the point. They think that being a leader is all about these superhero qualities, when in actual fact, it's taking a step back and being human. Trust, as we spoke about, integrity, doing what you say you're going to do, meaning what you say. So yeah, really, really powerful answer. And yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Barry, that's it for 4 questions. I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you so, so much.
No, thank you, Marzena. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, you take care, and great to chat to you. See you soon.
Thanks.